to get into probably how many crumbs she left in that book. I'm sorry, that's like one of my most cracky theories from here. I know. Yeet herself out of this situation, yeeted it into an ocean, yeeted themselves out. Maybe she'll yeet herself through the skies. It's a bit of a crack theory, but that would make total sense. Hi, I'm Madison, welcome back to my channel. Today I have, I don't even know what this video is. I've never made anything like this before, but this is gonna be me delving into crack theories, basically, because some of these are pretty far-fetched, some of them are not so far-fetched, some of them are pretty well done, and some of them we don't really know, but these are all based on Sarah J Maas, and I'm going to be mostly focusing on Crescent City 3. CC3, these are my thoughts on where things are going to go. It's going to kind of be me kind of putting everything together that we just learnt in House of Sky and Breath, everything that we learnt in this book that I'm now putting together and have kind of just like had a come to Jesus moment. So I do want to say this book is going to contain spoilers for the Throne of Glass series, spoilers for the Crescent City series, and spoilers for the ACOTAR series, verse, whatever you want to call it, because if you finished House of Sky and Breath, you will know where I'm coming from. So I did pull all these books. I did have I literally was FaceTiming a friend at one point and was just getting up and pulling these books out and like flipping through and trying to find certain scenes and passages to like double check stuff. I literally was like, you know that like gif with like the Einstein stuff and like all the like the numbers coming in? Yeah, I was having like that moment. I also have been the person where whenever I have a friend who finishes the book, they FaceTime me right afterwards. So I've had multiple people to talk about this with and kind of flesh out my theories. I haven't seen anyone else's videos, I don't think. So I need to go back and watch a couple, but I kind of wanted to just delve off what I figured out myself, some of the Tumblr theories I found because I went through like a Tumblr hole. There are a lot of things that I kind of found myself, so if you are curious, I do have a reading vlog. Good God, I think I actually have a reading vlog for Kingdom of Ash because I read that when I first started my booktube channel. A lot of my memories from the Throne of Glass series are very spread out because I started reading the series back in like 2014. ACOTAR I recently reread last year for when A Court of Silver Flames came out, read A Court of Silver Flames last year, reread Crescent City last month just before House of Sky and Breath came out, and just read House of Sky and Breath. So feeling pretty fresh on a couple of things. I do want to say I feel bad for anyone who decided to skip A Court of Silver Flames and just went into the Crescent City series without knowing anything, because the amount of bombshells that were dropped in that book is ridiculous, and I know that I'm going to do another reread of all these books next year. I'm definitely rereading all three of these before Crescent City 3 comes out, just because I know that there's probably so many things dropped in A Court of Silver Flames that I don't remember that are so blatantly obvious. I don't even want to get into it. I don't want to get into probably how many crumbs she left in that book. So what we can basically confirm is that the Dust Court is, you know, where the prison is. It's also the 8th Court, and it is basically where the Fae from Crescent City came from, because Theon was the last High King of Prythian, and he had his High Queen, and he was one of the main people who got rid of the Dagland when they were trying to take over Prythian, and they were trying to, you know, kill and take over everyone. It was said that the Dagland, word for word, I think it's in chapter, I have it written down actually, in chapter 55, it is said that the Dagland were gods / monsters. They ruled for millennia, enslaved us and the humans. They were petty and cruel and drink the magic of the land like wine. They drank the magic. I mean, like how the Asteri drink magic. So basically you can assume that the Daglan and the Asteri are one and the same. And we know that Theon was given Gwydion from the High Priestess, which was then dipped into the cauldron as a made sword, and that is what he used to defeat them. However, his reign ended when his queen teamed up with his general, overthrew him, and then took some of his magical shit and disappeared. Now, who could that possibly be other than Queen Thea and Lord Peleus? Her general, Lord Peleus, then you have Queen Thea. Queen Thea was Theon's wife. That's right. And so Queen Thea, who we know had the 2 daughters, we have Helena and the mysterious daughter number 2, which I'll get back to later. So she has 2 daughters. She also was with Peleus, and we know that she is the last High Queen of the Fae from Prythian and was from the Dust Court. She was queen from the Dust Court. That is where her magic is from. And so what we can assume is that when the Daglan were over and there was the rift was created, that Thea went over the rift and went to where Crescent City is, went to Midgard. So what we do know is that that's what Thea did. Thea was also then slayed by Peleus before he then forcibly married Helena, and that they are now like the people who are like the Starborn Fae, and that is where Rune and Bryce's whole like bloodlines come from, is from these Starborn Fae. And so that is that, and we know that Starborn Fae have the Star Sword. We now have it confirmed that the Star Sword that, you know, Rune and Bryce know as their birthright from the Starborn Fae is actually Gwydion from King Fion. Now, that being known, we know that the Star Sword has a dagger counterpart, and from the end of House of Sky and Breath, we now know that Truth Teller is that counterpart. Now, here is where things kind of get into a bit of a crack theory. One of the theories is that, you know, we know that Thea's second daughter, mysterious daughter number 2, she went missing. No one knows what happened with her. The guess is that when Thea and Peleus stole shit and went over to Crescent City, they probably stole the Star Sword, Truth Teller, the horn, and the harp. What we can then guess is that sister number 2 decided to yeet herself out of this situation and was like, this is dumb. Yeeted herself back to Prythian with the harp and Truth Teller so that the two were not connected anymore. And by leaving them there, that is how then she then closed the rift, was using the harp to then close the rift and then trap everyone back in Crescent City away from Prythian so that the Asteroid, the Daglin, couldn't come back to the Prythian world. Which is why when Nesta is touching the harp in A Court of Silver Flames and she hears there are people who are trapped, she's hearing the voices of the people who were trapped back in Crescent City and during the crossing when she closed the rift, when daughter number 2 closed the rift. That is a theory, which does make sense because the harp currently sits on an 8-pointed star. It is said the harp is on an 8-pointed star. Bryce has a 8-pointed star on her chest, signaling her as a Starborn Fae, and this is also a star that was on the chest of Queen Thea. So we can guess that is where it comes down to. Now, going off of that, we also like to mention that Nesta has an 8-pointed star. When she made her bargain, it manifested as an 8-pointed star. I'm going to keep going with this theory right here. We can then guess that it is going to be Nesta who is able to charge up Bryce and charge up the horn. Why do I think that? When Nesta, during A Court of Silver Flames, at one point when she's falling down the stairs at the House of Wind, when she's on her, you know, when she's dealing with her shit and she goes tumbling down the stairs, she grabs on at one point and sparks come out of her. So we can guess that she's got some kind of like sparky magic that she will be able to use to light up Bryce. That's a theory there. Going back to this whole Star Sword Truth Teller thing, do I think that they're gonna have to take Truth Teller back to Crescent City? No. I think it's gonna stay in Azriel's possession. Why do I think this? Because I think that Azriel is a descendant of Queen Thea. I think he is the descendant of Thea's second daughter who came back, which would make sense because his magic is very much like the Avalon Fae that we know of in Crescent City. Now, the Avalon Fae, we know it's where Rune's mum is from. We know that's where Cormac is from. Now, I want to quickly say something here. I know everyone's going to get super, super upset at me. I have a nickname for Cormac. His name is #CormacTheCrisp. I'm so sorry. I had to do it. The reason why I also think this makes sense is because dusk is in the middle of night and day, and the magic of the Dusk Court is very much like a mixture between the night and the day court, because they have the light magic, because it is said that Feyre, when Feyre lights up and she glows during sexual intercourse, and when she's happy, is very much comes from the day court, and it's that healing magic. However, we also know that the shadows are like Azriel shadows, and how Rhys is able to also use shadows, and that's Night Court-esque. However, we do know that Az's shadows are very much different. Az's shadows are mentioned as being snake-like, which would make sense if Az was actually from the Dusk Court, which is where that kind of magic originates from. So we can imagine that that kind of magic is like a mixture of the two, and that's where the Dusk Court comes from. Now, staying with the ACOTAR world, we do know that when it comes to the Illyrians, that they have like the mother peaks, the three sister peaks, and one of the main peaks is Ramiel, and Ramiel is used for the Wild Hunt, and there is a stone on the top of Ramiel that when you touch it at the end of the Wild Hunt, you as an Illyrian come into your full powers. I literally came up with this as I was writing down my notes because I saw someone say, hey, maybe the stone on Ramiel is like is made from the same material as the gates in Crescent City, and that is what they can use to then take her back. My brain though then went, oh my god, if that's the case, then maybe when the Illyrians touch Ramiel at the end of the hunt and get more magic, they're actually making the drop. Now, we do know that Truth Teller was found on Ramiel. That's where Azrael found it. We can guess that as it would make sense that he's able to use and wield Truth Teller and use its magic because he's also a descendant of the Starborn Fae, because he's a descendant from the Dust Court of the missing second daughter, which would make sense, especially because we know that Az doesn't winnow. He doesn't winnow, he teleports, and they've said that before. They have said in the ACOTAR that Az's way that he travels isn't winnowing, it is teleporting, which is what the Avalon Fae in Crescent City do. They teleport and they use their shadows to teleport. That is what Cormac does. So that's how it makes so much sense. Now, sticking with this whole Ramiel, Asterai, and the Dulglin Fae. Now, the Daglan, who, you know, were the eaters of Prythian, are now probably also the Asterai, who are the eaters of Midgard. I don't know 100% sure if this is correct, but I kind of am also thinking, are they kind of like the Volg from the Throne of Glass series? The only reason why I'm not 100% is that for some reason the Daglan and the Asterai both feed off kind of like light magic, whereas the Volg are kind of like darkness magic. However, they are both conquerors, and they are both people who have to inhabit human bodies in order to actually do stuff. So that's where they're very much similar there. I would also like to think that Amarantha's eyes are mentioned as being totally black at one point, which are what happens with the Volg. There is a thought process that maybe Amarantha was actually a Volg queen, or that the King of Hybern was actually one of the Volg as well, and that they were also part of this world. I know this seems very far-fetched. Going off this though, however, is the fact that also in Throne of Glass world you have blood oaths. Blood oaths come from Throne of Glass. There is only one character throughout the entirety of the Crescent City series who also uses blood oaths, and that is the Viper Queen. The Viper Queen is someone who does not make any sense. She doesn't really fit in with anyone else. No one fully understands her. She has her own domain. She's kind of like just her own entity and no one gets it. Would it not make sense if the Viper Queen is actually a Volg Queen? I know. I think that makes so much sense to me if the Viper Queen was a Volg Queen. It would make so much sense. It would make so much sense. That being said, I want to also remind people that we are still missing one item still that has not been found, and that is Amarantha's sword, which is Nabarin? I forget, I didn't write it down because I already remembered it, but it is the last other maid sword. That has still gone missing because Amarantha yeeted it into an ocean. I think that's going to come back at some point. Don't know how, don't know when, but it will be prominent. Not in Crescent City, but in ACOTAR, but just want to remind you guys just in case anyone had forgotten that that existed. Now, what I do think is curious is the fact that the Star Sword can kill the unkillable when it is, you know, using Bryce's magic. So can Truth Teller also kill the unkillable, and therefore could Az then use Truth Teller to kill Koschei, the Deathless, over on his little island with Vassar? Theory. Now we're going to keep going with the Illyrians here. Here we have, in ACOTAR, we have the Illyrians, the Seraphim, and then the Penguin. I don't really know how to explain, but they're all different winged creatures. And then Throne of Glass, you've got one winged creature. And then in Crescent City, you got the angels. Now, it is said that Hunt was bred. And it is said that Hunt doesn't smell like an angel. We can therefore assume that Hunt was bred in a similar way, and maybe he is actually from the Dust Court in a sense like that. All the other winged creatures were technically like bred in certain ways, and that's how they came to be. Would it not make sense if Hunt was also done the same way? Now, do I still know who Hunt's dad is? I don't want to get into that right now. We'll get into it later, but that is like the biggest headache out of everything in this, and I'm so annoyed because it was barely touched upon in this book. We can therefore guess that Thea's bloodline, her Starborn Fae bloodline, somehow ended up within the Illyrian bloodline, and that's, once again, like I said, how maybe it came into being with like Azrael's magic and how he came to be and why he's so different. So just want to put that back out there again. I do think that it was maybe the Illyrians who also helped Thea's second daughter get back from the rift. I think they're like one of the creatures that didn't go over, or maybe a couple of them did, and that is why Hunt's people kind of went over there, and like why he has like his wings the way they are. That could be like a whole thing there. Maybe that's how Annelius had Truth Teller, is because the second daughter gave it to Annelius as like a gift, or for him to look after when they got back to Prythian. She gave him Truth Teller to look after so that it wasn't found again. Possible, I don't know. Now let's shift away from this and kind of go into Nesta and Elaine and the fourth trove item. So we can now assume that the fourth trove item is 100% Luna's horn. We can assume this because Nesta saw it when she was having that weird vision with that creature in the prison, and she saw all 4 items, and the 4th one was the horn, and it was made of age-worn ivory. We also know that when scrying, ɪḻaɪn wasn't able to find the horn. It would make sense that she was unable to find it if we assume that A Quarter Silver Flames took place during the same time as Crescent City, when Bryce is still wearing her amulet, because that amulet hides the horn from anyone being able to find it. Therefore, ɪḻaɪn would not be able to find that 4th trove item, scrying for it, if it is currently hidden by that amulet. I do want to also mention at this point, because I don't think I haven't said it yet, but I do think that House of Sky and Breath takes place after A Quarter Silver Flames. When you do analyze it, I'm guessing that this is set at the townhouse in Valaris, and I'm saying that we know that Asriel is there, we know that Nesta and Cass are there, we know that they're amicable, they're in the room together at the same time, we know that Feyre and Rhys join them afterwards, and we know that Amren is already there. Mor isn't there, and ɪḻaɪn isn't there. At the end of A Quarter Silver Flames, we know that Mor goes off on her own quest. And it would make sense if ɪḻaɪn wasn't there, if, you know, they've had the bébé, and we can assume that maybe ɪḻaɪn is staying at the new estate that Rhys built for Feyre, if she's there and she's looking after the bébé, and is not, you know, therefore there with them, and they didn't want to harm her, or maybe she was currently scrying or something or other. Now we have a brand new crack theory, and that is that Rune is not the Autumn King's son, which is why his prophecy, when it says the royal bloodline will end with you, is because he's actually not part of the royal bloodline. We can assume that Rune is definitely a part of the Starborn Fae, but maybe the Autumn King isn't actually his dad. You know? Who knows? Maybe that's the case. Also, if we know that Thea and her bloodline all have the last name like Starborn, like that's their last name, their bloodline is the Starborn Fae, can we assume possibly that the reason why we've never learnt what Rhys's last name is because his last name is Starborn? That'd be really weird, but it was one of the crack theories I saw on Tumblr, and I go, I might bring it up just in case this does come back. It would be kind of weird, but I mean, wouldn't be totally unfounded. We do know that Rune is a descendant of Helena from Thea, and if we assume that somehow Thea's second daughter ended up back in Prythian, her bloodline could be somewhere in the Night Court, the Dust Court, kind of a whole situation with Asriel or something within the Illyrians, you know? It's totally plausible. Also want to mention that ɪḻaɪn's magic is quite like the oracles in the Crescent City. Her seer magic as a seer is very much like the oracles and the mystics. So is it possible that she can, through ɪḻaɪn, that they will be able to contact the mystics or the oracles in Crescent City, and that is then how they will then contact back and forth when Bryce is in Prythian? Possibility there, especially since Ethan at the end of it saves the Fender heir, who is also a mystic and can go between universes. Huge possibility. I want to quickly touch on Jessica. Who is Jessica? Who is Jessica? Because when Apollyon, who is the 7th Prince of Hell, when he hears about Jessica, his first thought is, oh, I know her, but I know her from a different name. A different name, you say? So then who is Jessica? Who is she? I don't know. Could she be from Throne? I bet your ass that the second we find out Jessica's true name, she is going to be a character from one of the 2 universes. My money is more so on her being from Throne of Glass, because that would be kind of cooler. But Jessica is a strange person. She has all this magic. She has access to the Pathos library. So maybe she is from ACOTAR since she has the Pathos library. She also has eyes that are silver. I want to mention at this point, Amren has silver eyes. Nesta has silver flame in her eyes. Jessica has silver eyes. Something strange going on there. Could Jessica be a maid person? Could she be made from something? Could she maybe be from the Cauldron, possibly? Who knows? Something super sus going on with Jessica. I know that she's going to be something from some other world, 100%. Just don't know what that is yet. I want to mention that Tumblr taught me that in Norse mythology, the word Urd, U-R-D, is synonymous with the word word, W-Y-R-D. Word, as in from Throne of Glass, you say? Hello? Connection or what? Especially since portal magic is such a major part of the Throne of Glass world. Hello, portal magic? I can't even get, don't even get me, I don't know if she's for sure going to bring in Throne of Glass characters at all. I really would love to see that. I would love to see Aelin again. That would make me so happy, but I don't know if she will actually do that. However, I do want to touch on the fact that when you do look at when Bryce is going through the rooms at the end of House of Sky and Breath and she's looking at the different worlds that exist, if you flick back through Kingdom of Ash and you look at the worlds that Aelin is describing that she sees as she's falling through the different universes, one of the worlds that she sees is completely covered in water, and one of the places that is mentioned as being attempted to be taken over by the Asteri is completely covered in water. So that does cross over. We also know that there are the original Fae are phase shifters. There are phase shifters, they've always existed. Phase shifters, some people are like, oh, that makes sense because the High Lords are able to shift. No, it would make more sense if you look at it from Throne of Glass, from Aurelia, because they are phase shifters. The entire cadre, they all shift. Fenris shifts into a wolf. Rowan shifts into a hawk. You got everyone who can shift in Throne of Glass world. The original phase shifters come from Throne of Glass. What does that mean? You got the Fender bloodline, the Fender heir, the Fenders. They are wolf shifters. Most likely they used to be Fae until that Faeness was bred out of them, but they are wolf shifters. Could it be from his bloodline? This was one thing that I saw on Tumblr as well, was this mention, and I go, wow, that would be, it's a bit of a crack theory, but that would make total sense. We need to remember that the 7th Asteri that was devoured by Apollyon the Star Eater is Sirius. Now the thing is one thing that Apollyon does say during this is that he hates being called Star Eater, he hates being referred to by that name. Can we assume that the 7th Asteri was never actually killed, and that the 7th Asteri just yeeted themselves out and were like, I don't really want to deal with this anymore? Now, I do not believe that Amren is the 7th Asteri. I do not believe that is her. When you go back to Wings and Ruin, and if you read the description that Amren says when she is about to give herself up to the cauldron, no one knows, but when she's in the middle of explaining where she came from, she explains that that her and her siblings had a father with a capital F. They were like the main beings of this world, and that she was not allowed to interact with the humans. That she comes from a world with humans, wasn't allowed to interact with them, wasn't allowed to be part of them, but always had more of a human feeling than any of her siblings did, and that's why she was then banished. She was banished to then go live with the humans because of that reasoning. And so that doesn't totally match up with the explanation of what the Asteri are. Then again, we don't know too much about the Asteri. We never really learned that much about kind of where they came from, who they are. We've only really ever seen Rigolus, the Bright Hand, which by the way is suspicious in itself. Like, how come we don't know what the other 5 Asteri are doing and what they're up to or what they even look like, because we've only ever talked to Rigolus. It's a little bit suspicious on my behalf, but I don't think that Amren is that 7th Asteri. Someone else could be. Hell, maybe Jessica is. Who knows? But it is not Amren. I do think though that when Amren leashed into her final form, that glowing angel, and that when that happened and she went into the cauldron, I do think that was her expelling her first light, and that is why she's now not as powerful, is because she used her magic, expelled her first light, and went into the cauldron. So there's that. That being said, we gotta remember, the Book of Breathings has been mentioned as being in the Pathos Library. It is seen at the end of Crescent City. Now, the Book of Breathings is the book that Amren and Feyre put together during A Court of Mist and Fury. That is what's put together and is then used to then put the cauldron back to life. We then don't know what ended up happening to it. How did it end up in the Pathos Library? My thought process is that the Pathos Library is actually the same library that is in the House of Wind. The House of Wind Library is known as being a sacred area. No one's allowed to interfere with it. It's also got 7 levels, like the 7 levels of hell, that as you go down it gets darker and darker and creepier. Would make sense if they're all connected. It would make sense if the library in House of Wind is actually kind of like a thin veil between the worlds, because you have Braxis, who is down there in that bottom layer, who is like the all-seeing, all-knowing kind of creature who's just chilling down there. Why would he be down there? How is he down there? Would it not make sense that it's the same kind of situation where the Princes of Hell put a creature into all these different worlds as their emissary? Because we know that the Hound that was in the Underking's world, that after Bryce and Hunt slayed it, Apollyon was like, yo, you killed my emissary. You killed the dude who was spying on shit for me. Would it not make sense that Braxis was also one of those creatures that was being used as a spy from Hell? Would that not make sense? Also, I don't know if you people noticed this, but I'm in a Court of Silver Flames while in the library. Nesta mentioned that as they go further down, and as it gets eerier and eerier and darker and more creepy, she feels the presence of a cat. A cat! A cat! Who is a cat? ɪİrs is a cat. Oh my god, ɪİrs has been chilling around the House of Wind, bro. He's in the library. That's why I think the library is such a point of veil thinness between the worlds, because he's able to get there, he's able to be there. Also makes sense because we know that Meryl, one of the priestesses within the library, is currently researching the 26 dimensions and that Gwyn is helping her. So I do think that Meryl is going to have a huge part, the library is going to have a huge part during Crescent City 3, and my guess is that if they do go to that library and are talking to Meryl, and if ɪİrs is able to manifest himself in that library, my guess is that similarly, he will then reappear again, and that is how he will be able to recontact Bryce. Oh, I just realized another one of my notes. I said, you know how I said Nesta will be able to charge Bryce? The harp also told Nesta that she would right the wrongs of a princess from 15,000 years ago. We do know that when the rift opened was 15,000 years ago. We know that the Asterai came to Midgard 15,000 years ago. We know that Amryn hasn't heard the old language since 15,000 years ago, so we can assume that the princess that they were referring to was Helena and Thea, and like them as the princess that Nesta is going to right the wrongs of. How would Nesta right those wrongs? By sending Bryce back after she gets the information she needs from Prythian. I have down that Rune and Lydia are mates. I think that's pretty obvious that a mating bond has 1,000% formed between them. Oh, fun fact, one of the lords in the hewn city in ACOTAR, in the Night Court, is called Thanatos. And we know that one of the princes of hell is also called Thanatos. And fun fact, in Greek myth, Thanatos is also known as death personified. Fun fact there. Someone said that if you look at the descriptions of the Chrysalis demon and the description of word hounds from Throne of Glass, that they are very similar. So is it possible that the Varg are also essentially the princes from hell? Like, are they hell creatures? Like, are the Varg from the realm of the planet of hell? Could that be that? We did also learn during House of Sky and Breath that the veil is thinnest during the autumn equinox and also on Death Day. So could those end up having huge significances during the third book? Is that how Bryce is going to get back on one of those days where the veil is the thinnest? We also still haven't had the winter solstice yet. The winter solstice was mentioned at the beginning of House of Sky and Breath, but it hasn't happened yet. So if Bryce is there during the solstice, when the souls make their traveling, which is when we saw Aelin fall through the worlds initially, will that be when Bryce also goes back, is during the winter solstice? Maybe she'll yeet herself through the skies and see Aelin. Maybe she'll fall through the different universes too, and that's how we'll see Aelin. We will see Aelin. I refuse that we don't see Aelin. Oh, it is also said that Bryce's star, ฬิᴏᴏ says that her star glows in the presence of true bloodlines. Now we can also assume that if Az is actually from the Starborn Fae bloodline, if he is a descendant of Queen Thea's missing daughter, maybe Bryce's star will glow in front of Asriel. However, we also know that it glows with her knights. Now that whole knight situation reminds me a lot of Throne of Glass with Aelin and her cadre. That kind of like gives me the same similar vibes thing going on there. So I wanted to point that out. Oh, someone said that maybe Bryce's mum, Ember, isn't actually 100% human. Could be, we don't know. We can also assume that Bryce, the Autumn King, all those kind of people, that they are descendants of Beron's bloodline from ACOTAR. I think it's gonna be hilarious when if Bryce does meet Lucian, when she sees him, if she's gonna like have like a heart attack because she's like, why do you look like my dad? I think that'd be hilarious. We can assume that these are descendants in the fact of they came over during that crossing. I do not think at all whatsoever that ACOTAR is in the same timeline as Crescent City. They are either different universes or they are different planets, but they are not the same place at a different time zone. They are completely different. I do not think that they are the same whatsoever. It also wouldn't make sense if they were the same if it's the idea that they are from where the original Fae was from. Is that really all I wrote down? Did I not have more? Oh, I already said this in my House of Sky and Breath vlog, but I think that the Med Witches in Crescent City remind me a lot of Irene Towers and that whole magic system from Throne of Glass. That would make sense. Also, we do know that Bryce does not speak the same language as the Prythians do. The Prythians speak a different language. They both speak the old language, which does make sense if the old language was from 15,000 years ago, from when Prythian was first formed before the rift and before the crossing. Okay, that does make sense. Throne of Glass had an old language that not everyone understood. Okay, my guess, however, I don't know how she's going to communicate with everyone, but my guess, however, is that the tattoo on Bryce's back is written in a language that we don't know. There's two options for this now. Either her tattoo is written in the words of whatever the Prythians speak, or it's written in word marks. I think it'd be personally cooler if it was written in word marks, because that would make sense, because at the end of Throne of Glass, when Rowan tattoos Aelin, he tattoos her with with portal magic. That is how Aelin is able to find her way back to Aurelia, is because of the portal magic tattoo from the word marks that Rowan inked into her back. So it would make sense if the same thing is what happened with Bryce's tattoo. But anyway, House of Sky and Breath ends. You've got Bryce and Prythian. You've got Hunt, Baxen, and Rune at the Asteroid Palace. They are all currently enslaved, but Hunt is hella enslaved because Regulus, enslaves the shit out of him. Lydia is with them, however, Rune does not trust her anymore, but she is still there as a double agent. You have Tharian as a #dumb bitch under the Viper Queen's now enslavement to an extent. You have Tristan Flynn and Declan Emmett. They are okay. They're out in the world. They're not in any imminent danger. And then you have Ethan with the Fender Air. Ethan is not technically in imminent danger from anyone, but he is in imminent danger from the astronomer because he keeps stealing the astronomer's shit. And also Sabine is like, I don't want you to find the Fender Air. So that's going to be super curious. We also know that Fury is in play. We do know, however, that Fury says that she does not want to have anything to do with messing with the Asteri. So we do know that she has a hard limit where she's like, I don't really want to mess with them, because that is where I'm like, Everyone is afraid of Fury. Everyone's afraid of Fury, and the same with everyone's afraid of Amryn. But Fury has this level where she's like, yeah, but I still don't want to mess with the Asteri, which is kind of curious. So she's still in play. The Autumn King is still in play. The Autumn King knows a lot of damn shit, okay? He knew that the tattoo on Sophie's arm was from, the archives, the Asteri archives. He also has been looking into the planets and the universes and portal magic and light magic for ages. This bitch knows way more than he's telling anyone. Will he tell anyone in Crescent City 3? Will he reveal his secrets? I doubt it, because he's a dick, but I bet he knows way more than we realize. Hella more. There's probably so much he knows, it's not even funny. Still don't fully understand the astronomer and how he comes into everything. I think he's going to have a prominent role in later books. We do know that the way that Sarah J. Maas is writing the Crescent City verse is that the first 3 books are following Hunt and Bryce's storyline, and then if she gets a book deal, she will then write subsequent Crescent City novels following different couples, which will be very similar to what she's done with the ACOTAR verse, where the first 3 books follow Feyre and Rhys, and now each subsequent book follows a different couple and an overarching plot line. So that is what she plans to do there. I think it would make sense then in those later books that we are following something to do with those kind of things. I definitely think that Rune and Lydia would be the first couple to get their book, because they are in such a interesting situation currently. My predictions for the next book is that we're going to have a very similar situation with Bryce being in Prythian as when Aelin was trapped in the beginning of Kingdom of Ash, and also when Feyre was in the Spring Court at the beginning of Court of Wings and Ruin. In both of those books, in both of those finales, the main character, our main heroine, was somewhere else away from the original party for at least the first quarter to the first third of the book. That would make sense if she does this again with Bryce being in Prythian for the first third, for the first quarter of Crescent City 3, because it would make sense with how she's going to kind of tie everything together. Now, I do think that she's getting to the point now where you will not be able to read the next ACOTAR book without having read the Crescent City series, because I think we're going to learn some things and some connections that are going to be very pivotal for later on. Do I think Bryce is actually going to make it to Hell? Maybe. I don't know. Her main goal is to get to Hell. I just don't know if she will be able to get there, Or maybe they'll have to take Bryce to the prison. Maybe Bryce will end up in the prison to figure out something there. I think that could be super curious. I think that would make a lot of sense. But I think that if she does go to hell, I think hell is going to be something that we definitely have to explore more of as well. There's so much opportunity there and so much of a question of what's going on there. So if we do explore that, there's going to be a lot more that we have to do. And I think that if she does end up in hell, it would therefore mean that I don't really know how she's going to do this timeline-wise in the next book. But we can assume that it has to be Lydia who is going to get Bryce, Hunt, and Rune. We can assume it's going to be Lydia who gets Baxian, Hunt, and Rune out of the Asteroid Palace. Declan Emmett obviously knows that they're there. He knows what's going on. He can see what's going on. So he's their eyes and ears. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how everything is going. But those are the connections I've currently made, how I think things are currently connected, where I think things are timeline-wise, things that have made sense, items that have made sense, items that have crossed over. Like I said, I think the Pathos Library is the House of Wind library, so I think we're going to see a lot of, I think that the House of Wind, that library there, is going to make a huge part of the next Crescent City book with Bryce's role there. I definitely really want to go back and read A Quarter Soul of Flames to see kind of the breadcrumbs that are left there, because I think that we have a lot of breadcrumbs like in this book. We also know that it was Moore's family who ruled before the rift occurred, so maybe there's something there to do with Moore and Moore's family and how she kind of relates to everything. Also, would it make sense, it wouldn't make sense for Amren to be an asteroid because she drinks blood, not magic, which is different. There's so much to kind of look at when Nesta goes to the prison. I feel like there's so much there that you can analyze. Anyway, that is it for some of my theories. Do let me know down below if you have any theories for House of Sky and Breath. Obviously, I will be rereading everything again next year before the third book comes out and kind of coming up with like my theories for what will exactly be coming in the third book. But these are kind of my crack theories for everything that's currently going on, everything that currently does exist. And yeah, that's it. If you guys did enjoy this video, please like button down below. If you want to see more of me, please go to my channel. And until next time, thanks so much everyone. Bye-bye.